I prepared my workbench with a new plastic blotter. I removed this filter capacitor from the amplifier chassis. It needs to be restuffed. There will be 5 more after this one. First, I'll be cleaning the outside of this filter capacitor with some acetone. I've cleaned the exterior of the filter capacitor. I was looking at the top here to see if I could bend open and remove the top, but the aluminum's just too thick. So I'm going to be cutting just below the top and then removing the contents and stuffing it with the new capacitor. I've got the filter capacitor in my vise ready for cutting. The top is cut off the filter capacitor. After a few minutes with a heat gun, I was able to remove the old filter capacitor from the can. I've marked each of the filter capacitors with the capacity, like 4 microfarads, 16 microfarads, and then with letters A, B, C, D, E, F. So when I rebuild the cans, I know where they go back. Here's the other two here. And the other one there. And the B filter capacitor connects to this terminal. This capacitor is ready to be stuffed back into the filtered can. I'll wrap some electrical tape around the filter capacitor before I set it back into the can, just to make sure the can and the outside of the filter capacitor don't touch. Electrical tape has been installed. Also added some liquid tape to put on the end of the cap. I'll be melting candle wax into the can with a heat gun to seal up the filter capacitors I installed. A little bit of a mess, but I've melted the wax into the can. I think with the other filter caps, I'll heat the wax up on a stove in a pot and then pour the hot wax into the cans. I've completed stuffing the first can on the Stratosphere. Turned out pretty well. It's got a 22 microfarad capacitor at 450 volts in place of the 16 microfarad. Again, this is labeled cap B, so I know where it goes back into the amplifier chassis. I've removed the 5 other filter capacitors. Each of them have the capacity and voltage rating marked on them. So these 5 are original. Here's the mounting nuts and lock washers for the filter capacitors. Next to each filter capacitor, I have the new electrolytic cap that's going to go inside the can. The last one here is supposed to be a 4 microfarad. I didn't have a 4 microfarad, so I'll put these two 10 microfarads in series to get equivalent of 5 microfarads. If we take a look at one of these cans here, you'll see a whole bunch of oxidation. The lug that connected to the outside of the can went to B-, and it's made of copper, and it just oxidized with this can. I think these cans are made out of copper also. I need to do some cleaning to see if that's the case. Also, I'm not sure how to open up these cans. It looks like the tops are soldered on, so I wonder if I apply a little bit of heat that I can pull the top off to remove the old filter capacitor. I thought I was going to have to apply heat to this painted can to get the internal electrolytic capacitor out, but it just seems to come out nice and easy. It's kind of fascinating how they installed this electrolytic capacitor into the can. If you look down at the bottom there, you can see a screw. And just soldered the wire that's going to the capacitor to a washer that's around the screw there. And then that screw just screws into this nut here. So I can just unscrew that and then install the new capacitors, our new capacitor over here. Try as I could not budge that screw down there, so I'm going to leave it in and use this wire to connect to the positive side of the new electrolytic capacitor. This is the 4 microfarad capacitor can. I'll be putting in these 10 microfarad capacitors in series, and then across each of these capacitors I'll put 150 k ohm 1 watt resistors to kind of keep the voltage the same across both. The 150k resistors at 1 watt are soldered across each of the electrolytic capacitors, ready to be stuffed into the can. First I'll connect the positive side to this lead here. The negative side, I think I'm going to be drilling a hole at the bottom edge here and have the wire come out to the B- bus. There was a small hole I drilled for the wire that's going to come out for the B- connection. Leads are all soldered in, ready to stuff back into the can. All that beautiful work taped over to provide insulation for the new caps in the can. Ready to melt the wax into the can. I'll reinstall this insulating paper to keep the can from hitting the capacitors. This cap is now filled with wax. I'll put the top back on the filter can with the hot wax to hold it. I've completed restuffing the second can. Turned out pretty well. The top went on pretty well. Sealed that on with wax. And again, I got this wire coming out the side. This is a B- wire. So I've got 2 caps done so far. The first 2 caps were oil filled. These 4 remaining caps, I guess, had the wet electrolytic inside. You can hear them shaking with all the particles and things that are broken loose inside. I've decided to cut the tops off of these copper cans with a hacksaw in lieu of using a torch to remove the caps on the top. Because if I use a torch, I'm going to lose all this black paint and the lettering, so that wouldn't be good. Well, the cap is cut off and all the internal components of the filter capacitor are coming out. It's kind of interesting inside of here. All the dust particles of the old wet part of the electrolytic. Starting to remove the internal of this filter capacitor, and it looks like a telescoping antenna. Finish removing the contents of the can. I think what I'm going to do is, there's a copper strap on the center post, positive lead of the capacitor. I'll solder the positive of the new capacitor onto that tab and restuff this cap. So that's it. Kind of interesting, all this stuff. I bent this center post a little bit over to one side so I can fit the new filter capacitor inside. And I filed down one of the rivet heads to see if I can get solder to flow on it so I can make the positive connection to the new cap. I was able to get that solder to flow on the rivet, putting some Vaseline on it after cleaning the terminal, applying a lot of heat with my soldering gun, and using this old 1930s solder that has a really good resin inside of it that allows solder to flow well. I was able to clean the cap pretty well inside with some lemon juice. Just brushed it, scrubbed it with a small thin brush. Looks like the insulating material is nice and clean. The insides still have a lot of the deposits from the electrolytic liquid. And I don't think that's going to come off. That's pretty well adhered to the copper like barnacles on the hull of a ship. And I'll also be drilling a hole at the bottom here for the negative lead to come out and connect to the B- terminal. Since this can is made out of copper, I'll be soldering the negative lead to the can, cleaning up the contact here on the bottom, because that makes contact with the lug that connects to the B- bus. The negative lead for the new capacitor has been soldered to the copper can. I've connected the positive lead to the rivet in preparation for connecting the new capacitor on the right there, and we'll stuff that into the can. New cap is soldered in. I'll put on the heat shrink over the connections. Heat shrink is installed. Now I'll put some black liquid tape, get that in a picture here, some black liquid tape on the bottom of the cap here. The liquid tape has been added on the bottom of the cap. Now we're ready for restuffing. Put some electrical tape around the cap just to assure there's no contact with the can. New capacitor has been stuffed into the can, ready to be filled up with wax. Here's my setup to support the filter can, my candlestick, my heat gun. I just use my heat gun to heat up the candle wax and let it just fill up the can. On this filter can, I didn't fill the wax all the way up to the top of the can, nor that of the lid. What I'm going to do is use PL construction adhesive and connect the top to the can that way. The electrolytic cans are ready to be touched up with some black paint. I'll be using black lacquered gloss paint. One of the filter can insulated bases, here's an original, was missing, so I'm going to make one up to the same thickness by using cut pieces of folder and gluing them together to make the same insulated base for the ones missing. I'll use a 3/16 punch to make the hole in the paper for the lug lead for the outside of the can. I've got the filter can insulated base made here. Compare it with the old one. The only thing missing is an eyelet to install. Most of the original cans in the amplifier chassis had these plastic screw bases. This one can was the oil-filled one, has an all aluminum screw base. So this screw base has a chance of shorting out on the chassis. I'm not sure exactly how Zenith installed it without it shorting out. So what I did is I made this plastic ring to go around the base so it goes through the chassis with the, get this on here. So it goes through the chassis. That plastic will keep it from hitting the chassis when I remount them. Even though this B- lug here for the filter can is not necessary, as we have the two wires coming out of the can, one of the wires being the B-. In the future, if this can is replaced, because this is not original to the Strat, this lug can be used with that original can. Here's the new lug that I made with the insulated base for this filter capacitor. And here's that filter can mounted on the base and how it'll look when it's back on the chassis. Looks like it turned out pretty well. I'll be painting all of the filter cans with some black Rust-Oleum lacquer. The filter cans have been painted. I was careful not to paint over the stenciled capacitor ratings and part numbers. This one cap on the end was a replacement, so there's no identification of the capacity or ratings of the can capacitor. So these are all ready for installation in the radio and the amplifier chassis. These two filter cans are ready for installation back into the amplifier chassis, and they'll be going right here. The old oil capacitor is Mark 4C, and that is this one here. I'll be adding some dielectric grease on the connections between the lug and the can to assure good electrical connection. The wire lug and nut are missing to connect these wires to the center of the filter capacitor, so I'll be making one. Here's the lug made, ready to install on top of the filter capacitor. I've decided to make an insulating base for that one filter can that was directly connected to the chassis, so I can connect the B- bus to that cap. The filter can insulators are ready for installation. The filter cap insulators have been installed.